All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week so far. Got a quick show for you today. I'm just going to do 3 instant reactions to games from last night. The Milwaukee Bucks hang with the Boston Celtics for about 2.5 quarters before they lose control and the Celtics pull away. The Phoenix Suns get their second consecutive impressive win versus teams that I think are in the playoff tier in the Western Conference, in the Dallas Mavericks, in the Los Angeles Lakers. We're going to be reacting to Lakers Suns from last night. And then Paolo Banchero goes for 50 against the Indiana Pacers, but I'm more interested in the way that he closed that game. So we're going to break down all 3 of those games from the perspective of both teams. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at @JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. Don't forget it's helpful if you also leave a rating and a review on that front. And then last but not least, keep dropping mailbag questions in the YouTube comments. We'll keep getting to them this week. I think we're planning for a mailbag that I'm recording on Thursday that's going to air on Friday. So I'll probably do a combination of YouTube comments and a tweet for that one as well. All right, let's talk some basketball. So Bucks-Celtics, really interesting game. It was back and forth for about 2.5 quarters. The Bucks do have some advantages in this matchup, and they showed them. Like Giannis, Al Horford, I thought did a good job on Giannis, but Giannis won some battles, particularly when he got ahead of steam and was really able to get downhill. And at that point, there's just not enough athletic tool available to Al Horford to kind of make up for that runway when Giannis is on it. He also did a lot of damage to Boston's guards in the post when Boston would do some switching, particularly Derek White. Just Giannis would be able to kind of pivot towards that base. Giannis has this unique ability too, where he can turn over his right shoulder and he doesn't really even look to shoot. He just like turns over his right shoulder and sees if you step out of your stance. And as soon as you step out of your stance, he'll step through and he'll just go up and dunk it. He won't even have to take a hook or a fadeaway or anything like that. He'll just go up and dunk it. He did some damage to the Boston guards that way. Dame had some success getting downhill against the Boston bigs in pick and roll just because they're not as fast as him. And they won some battles, right? They won some battles on defense too. They did a nice job on Tatum. I thought Gary Trent Jr. did a really nice job against Jayson Tatum in this game. Like specifically Gary Trent, the thing that he's good at on defense is attacking the basketball. And Jayson Tatum is very much a rhythm player, likes to kind of get his dribble going side to side and kind of get to that flow with his jump shot. And Gary Trent was doing a nice job just kind of disrupting that rhythm by not trying to contest Tatum up top, but trying to bother him during his gather, trying to disrupt his rhythm. Taurean Prince did a nice job on a couple of Jayson Tatum switches too. So they forced Jayson Tatum into his first rough offensive game of the season. He had just 15 points on 16 shots. I think he made 4 of his first 6, and then he went 2 for 10 down the tail end, down the stretch of the game. So good defensive effort from the Bucks there. But still, even with all of that, they were just kind of in the game going into the late portion of the third quarter. And then the Bucks let go of the rope and they started getting outworked. A few Celtics players in particular started to really outwork them. And that's the concerning part, which I'm going to get to in a little bit. But specifically on the Boston front, Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, and Jordan Walsh made a lot of big hustle plays and they turned the game around really quick. And all of a sudden, the Celtics are up by 13 in the early part of the fourth quarter and the game is over. The Bucks were up by 1 with less than 2 minutes left in the third quarter. That's when the hustle plays started to tilt towards Boston. There was a long rebound to the foul line where Gary Trent Jr. was right there, and he let Pritchard out jump him for the rebound. Gary Trent's a bigger, better athlete. He's got to go get that basketball. Pritchard beats him to a 50-50 ball. Ball gets worked around. Derek White hits a 3 in Giannis's face on the left wing. By the way, Derek White was just incredible down the stretch of this game. He had another pull-up 3 on the next possession against this switch with Bobby Portis. There's like an exchange in a switch, right? Where like you're dribbling against a defender that's up on you and you go through the screen to the next defender. And there's an interchange there where the first defender is kind of coming off of you as the second defender is getting ready to come up. And there's a gap in between that switch where you can find some space to shoot a pull-up 3. Bobby Portis was just sitting back on his heels. He switched out onto Derek White, but Derek White is a good pull-up shooter and he just walked and he had just hit a pull-up 3 over Giannis. Bobby Portis was too slow. Derek White rose up and hit another huge pull-up 3. He had a couple of big defensive plays down the stretch of this game. Derek White was just insane. So the Derek White makes this just unbelievable defensive play on the next possession. So he hits the pull-up 3 over Bobby Portis. They go down to the other end, and there's a ball screen with Dame and Giannis, and Dame's getting downhill, and Derek White corrals and contains Dame. But Giannis is rolling behind the play, and Dame drops it off to Giannis. And after containing Dame, Derek White turns and walls up and stonewalls Giannis Antetokounmpo with the head of steam at the rim. It was one of the best defensive plays I've seen a guard make, considering the talent that he was like single-handedly stopping a Dame Giannis ball screen. It was insane. Very next possession, Jordan Walsh does a nice job taking advantage of the way the Bucks were defending. The ball got worked around over to the right wing. Giannis and Bobby Portis were the two guys kind of on the back line of the defense, and they decided to ignore Jordan Walsh in the weak side corner. Now, if you're being ignored in the weak side corner, you basically have three jobs, right? If it gets skipped to you, you need to either hit a three or attack the closeout, right? If the ball makes its way towards the rim and there's enough space for you to cut along the baseline, you need to cut along the baseline, right? To try to make yourself available in the dunker spot. Then the last piece of it is, if the shot goes up and you're in the weak side corner being unguarded, you better not just jog your ass back on defense. You got to crash the offensive glass. And Jordan Walsh just came right inside and punished Bobby Portis and Giannis for ignoring him, and he gets an offensive rebound putback. Another hustle play. On the very next offensive possession for the Celtics, there's another loose ball that's right there for the taking for the Bucks, and Peyton Pritchard just shoots the gap once again in front of Gary Trent Jr. and gets another loose ball. Pritchard also added one of his like kind of iconic, it's becoming iconic at this point, end of the first quarter, end of the third quarter buzzer beaters as he hit like a little step back jump shot on the right wing. He was insane in this game. But then the play that really put the game out of reach was another kind of sloppy play from the Bucks. It was in the early fourth quarter, ball screen with Jaylen Brown on the left wing. And again, like the Celtics shot pull-up jump shots pretty well in this game, but at the same time, like every time you put two on the ball against Boston, it's pretty much a disaster. But Bobby Portis made the cardinal mistake of putting two on the ball by blitzing Jaylen Brown on a ball screen on the left wing. But when he blitzed Jaylen Brown, he didn't actually contain Jaylen Brown. And Jaylen Brown split the blitz, got downhill, drew Pat Connaughton in help, and then it was just a wide open three for Peyton Pritchard, who was money, and knocked it down. All of a sudden, they're up 13, and the game is basically over. So it's fascinating to me because, like, Milwaukee made some plays in this game. They had some advantages. They stayed in for a while. But at the end, Boston was the smarter basketball team. They were the more well-coached basketball team. They were the more organized basketball team, the more disciplined basketball team. And it's fascinating because you're already at a disadvantage if you're Milwaukee, right? You can't afford to be at a talent disadvantage and at an execution disadvantage. This has actually been a long-standing basketball theory of mine. It's why I don't believe that teams can flip the switch. The only teams in NBA history that have ever successfully flipped the switch have been defending champions that have monumental talent advantages that are uniquely able to be lazy during the regular season. There has never been a team that like the Milwaukee Bucks, that is just another contender that has not won a championship recently, that is trying to make this happen. There's never been a team like that has been sloppy and undisciplined and then suddenly been able to turn it on at the end of the season. The reason why is there's a huge difference between what is habitual behavior and something that you're just doing on any one single possession or any one single stretch of possessions. Habitual means it's instinctual. You have a habit of doing it regardless of what the surrounding circumstances are. Even when you're just kind of engrossed in the flow of the game, you just have a natural ability through your habit to do the right things, right? That is something that you practice. That is something that starts from the very beginning of the season at the start of training camp. This is why I'm such a big believer that the team who wins the trophy is almost always a very high seed, and why I think it's important to attack the regular season from start to finish, even though we think of the regular season as long and every game's not super important and we need to manage our bodies and load management and all this stuff. That's all great. The team who wins the trophy attacks the regular season from the start to finish. And that's because that is how you establish the habits that will carry you down the line. For serious basketball teams like the Boston Celtics, excellence is a habit. Every effort detail, every closeout, every box out, every transition sprint, every loose ball that becomes available. There is an expectation bred in camp that those things are a requirement. And so they become habitual and consistent, right? Every execution detail, these are the mental things, right? Your spacing, attentiveness to the defensive game plan, meaning as you get your scouting report, how you guard each individual player, what you do in specific coverages, that sort of attention to detail. Decision-making when you're driving the ball to the basket, making the right play, going for great shots instead of good shots. There is an expectation bred in camp from day one that those sort of things are a requirement to be on the floor if you play for the Boston Celtics. For less serious teams like the Milwaukee Bucks, they're constantly looking for reasons and excuses to cut corners, right? Because they want to conserve energy and make sure everyone's ready when they get to April. But as a result, they do not have those habits. So what happens is they end up in high leverage games. They end up in important games, right? Last night was an important game for the Bucks. For the Celtics, you're 3-0. You lose that game, nobody cares. You're the defending champs. You're favored to win the title by a mile. That's not an issue, right? Milwaukee needed that game. They started 1-2. They're coming off of 2 really embarrassing losses to the Chicago Bulls and the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets game in particular was legitimately embarrassing for them. Not a good look, right? They needed this one. So they end up in this high leverage game, need this game. And so then suddenly they can kind of like impersonate a serious team, right? And they do all the right things. And maybe they can do it for a quarter. Maybe they can do it for 2 quarters. Maybe they can do it for 3 quarters. But almost always in games like that, the team that is habitually disciplined and habitually works their ass off on every single possession, that team has a habit of maintaining that through the long run. And the team that is less serious, where those things are not a habit, eventually they let go of the rope. Like they hang on for dear life and they're like, yeah, we're hanging with the Boston Celtics. We can do this. And then suddenly they let go. And then boom, within a couple of minutes, you're down 13 because the serious basketball team is relentless with their execution and their effort. The Celtics did not need that game last night nearly as much as the Bucks did. Neither team needed the game, but the Celtics certainly didn't need it as much as Milwaukee did, and yet they worked harder down the stretch. Peyton Pritchard beating them to loose balls. Jordan Walsh beating them to loose balls. Derek White making second and third efforts on defensive possessions. That to me is what is always super fascinating about the reality of building habits from the early part of the season. The Bucks got outworked in that game, and that's something that cannot happen in a matchup against the Boston Celtics. Good win for the Celtics, 4-0. Again, it's just like in the Celtics game, or excuse me, just like in the Pistons game, just regardless of what happens through the first few quarters, just having those brief spurts of excellent two-way execution down the stretch of games to put them away and get one in the win column. Does your favorite NBA player have what it takes to be crowned king of the court? Find out at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. DraftKings is offering $1 million a day in bonus bets for the first 10 days of the NBA season. That's $10 million in bonus bets. Here's how you shoot your shot. Opt in and get a daily NBA profit boost token. Pick a pregame NBA player prop to boost, and if that player leads the league that night in points plus rebounds plus assists, you win a share of the $1 million in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS to win a share of $1 million in bonus bets if your player is king of the court. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. Lakers Suns. Almost as bizarre as the game last week. The Suns come off to a great start in the game last week. They're cooking. They're hitting every shot they take. Lakers got off to a similar start in the first quarter. This one, they take an 18-point lead. Anthony Davis is just cooking everybody. And then the Suns go on their big run, and they kind of slowly walk the Lakers down. The second half turned into much more of a back and forth type of game. The Suns really put on a pull-up jump shooting clinic in this game. They made 13 pull-up jump shots. That's the most they've made in any game yet this season. They went 11 for 21 from the mid-range, so well over a point per possession on mid-range jump shots. That's obviously like a great sign of just elite shot making. Kevin Durant was surgical down the stretch of this game. He hit 3 mid-range jump shots in the final 4 minutes of the game. That's always the scariest thing with Phoenix, right? You end up in a close game with them late. They just have such a shot-making advantage, right? And even if you do everything right on defense, they might just hit shots and you might just lose, right? Like we had a game, the first game of the season, where the Suns stole a game from the Clippers just because KD hit a completely smothered right shoulder fadeaway over a double team. So like that's some of the reality of the threat that Phoenix presents to teams, right? I wanted to talk about Ryan Dunn for a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about the Suns in the big picture in a second, but I want to talk about Ryan Dunn for a second because I think he only played like 15 minutes, but he was everywhere in the minutes that he played. He helps to swing the physical dynamic of this matchup into something that's more manageable for the Suns. So like the Lakers have won coming into last night, they had won 4 of their previous 6 matchups against the Phoenix Suns because of a specific matchup problem. They're just so much bigger and stronger in the front court. So then the Suns have this issue where it's like, if they play centers, whether it's, last year Nurkic and Eubanks or this year it's Nurkic and Plumlee, the Lakers can just spam pick and roll because Nurkic, Plumlee, and Eubanks last year couldn't really switch onto good perimeter players, right? So when they spam pick and roll, it's just like whether it's AD and Austin Reeves or it's AD and LeBron or it's AD and D'Angelo Russell, the Lakers can just consistently get to their comfortable kind of like shot attempts that they get in ball screens. And then if the Suns go small and they go with a bunch of perimeter players and Kevin Durant at center, then all of a sudden it's like Anthony Davis and LeBron James just start bullying in the post because maybe they can find somebody to guard LeBron, but then AD goes off, or maybe they find someone to guard AD, but then LeBron goes off, right? And it just turns into a physical mismatch in the front court. Ryan Dunn dramatically increases the physical profile of their lineups, both with centers on the floor and without centers on the floor. And it just makes it so much tougher for the Lakers to bulldoze them the way that they do. How many times in this game did you see Ryan Dunn stonewall a big man rolling to the rim or end up on an island against LeBron James? LeBron tries to power through him and he just holds his ground and plays physical defense. I love that quote that I heard from the Suns broadcast from Kevin Durant talking about how his favorite thing about Ryan Dunn is that he commits fouls. And he talks about how like young players that come into the NBA are like timid and don't want to be physical with the existing pros. And like Ryan Dunn just like commits fouls. And that to me is like a competitiveness on the defensive end of the floor. I actually run into a similar issue with the high school kids that I coach, right? Like I'm a grown ass man. I'm 6'6", I weigh 230 pounds and I play basketball all the time. So like when I'm going against high school kids, they're at a huge physical disadvantage against me. But like most of the time when I'm trying to play against them, whether it's just like a little bit of fun king of the court at the end of practice or whatever it is that we're doing, the guys like don't want to touch me. They don't want to be physical. They don't want to like play defense. But there are a handful of guys that have come through that program in the 4 years that I've been coaching there who like, they don't care that I'm older. They don't care that I have a lot more experience playing the game. They're like, screw this. I want to try to win whatever it is that we're doing. So I'm going to be physical. I'm going to try to defend. And there are a couple guys that come to my mind in the time that I played. And those guys tended to be higher level players in our program because it's a way they're wired. It's a physical competitiveness. It's a willingness to get dirty. It's a willingness to get into a rock fight. And Ryan Dunn, he has a high foul rate. He commits almost 7 fouls per 36 minutes to start the season. And that's going to be something that keeps his minutes somewhat limited until he can be a little bit more picky with it. But like he is a legitimate athletic weapon that the Suns can unleash on their opponents. Not too much you can look at the box score last night. He only had 7 points, 1 rebound, and a steal and a block. But I thought he was dominant in the minutes that he played. Another part of it too is he just takes a lot of hits. Like if you allow him to take a lot of the hits on those rolls, in those drives, in those post-ups, that alleviates wear and tear that goes on Kevin Durant over the course of the season, on Royce O'Neal over the course of the season. It gives you the ability to go smaller without being as physically limited. There's so much upside to Ryan Dunn's growth this year. And again, like, he's scoring at a rate of 19 points per 36 minutes when he's on the floor. That's really good. He's shooting 52% from the field and 44% from three. He's converting spot-up possessions at 1.33 points per possession this season. Some of these shots he's hitting are contested. He had a couple contested corner jump shots last night. Like, he has transition athleticism, that awesome, like, kind of slaloming reverse layup that he had. Like, he's turned himself into a useful offensive player. And that's just, I mean, you could make the case he should play more. The Suns closed with Plumlee and Royce O'Neal yesterday, and I get it. Like, AD had been torching Royce O'Neal in the post, so Budenholzer went back to Plumlee to make sure they had enough size to match up with AD. And Royce O'Neal also like just is a little bit more like sharp in the drive and kick game than Ryan Dunn. So like, for instance, Royce O'Neal had a really nice like closeout attack where he hit a floater in crunch time, his big shot in the game last night, right? Like that game was close. There's a lot of different ways that could have swung one way or the other. That was a huge shot that Royce O'Neal made, like driving the closeout. But there's a case to be made that maybe Ryan Dunn should have started or closed that game at the 5 instead of Plumlee, right? Like with how bad their centers have been, there's a case to be made that that's the type of direction that the Suns can go or should go at times. But most importantly, Suns fans should just be very excited. When you get that kind of quality rotation piece in the late first round like that, that's a huge win for your franchise. Overall with the Suns, still a bit inconsistent with their offensive approach. Everything still swings on their willingness to make simple reads and try to like play advantage creation, advantage extending, play finishing basketball versus two-man game, like just kind of like focusing on shot making, right? Like they're at their best when they don't settle and they get advantages, expand advantages, and get wide open catch and shoot threes and layups, right? Last night, they were at their best when they were skipping the ball and pick and roll to those weak side 2-on-1s, or when they would draw ISO double teams from Kevin Durant. So the Lakers were getting picked apart by just basic guard screens for KD that was getting D'Angelo Russell onto KD, and then KD would either score on D'Angelo Russell in single coverage or draw a double team, and they'd work it around and end up getting a wide open shot. But like I thought KD just did a wonderful job managing that dynamic in crunch time yesterday as he just completely picked the Lakers apart. But so far, for the most part, in the aggregate, the Suns have done a good job. They have 69% of their made baskets so far have been assisted. That's a huge increase from last year, and I think that's going to be the biggest indicator of their success. They can keep their assist percentage in the high 60s. That to me is a sign of them playing with the right offensive approach. And they still haven't really got Devin Booker going. He's off to a slow start this year. So like there's still a level that they can get to on the offensive end. Couple of impressive wins in a row for the Phoenix Suns. The Mavs and the Lakers are, in my opinion, two very good playoff teams, and the Suns got them both. On the Lakers front, kind of an interesting reversal of lineup success last night. Like throughout the first 3 games of the season, the LeBron-led groups with AD off the floor have been kicking butt. And have built huge leads for the Lakers that they've been able to ride to wins. But, and then the AD groups with LeBron off have been less good. They've been actually a very slight negative. I think they were going into last night like -2 per 100 possessions, right? Last night, it was the AD-led groups that were completely dominant, and the LeBron-led groups were just hemorrhaging leads. And for the LeBron-led groups, there were like 2 driving forces behind that, in my opinion. One, the young players for the Lakers last night had their first really bad decision-making game. Like Dalton Knecht, I thought, took some really bad shots. He took like a bad transition kind of running shot that wasn't open against Bradley Beal. He took a heavily contested early shot clock 3 on the left wing. Like one of the things with Dalton Knecht is it's like, dude, you're getting guarded like you're a lights-out shooter. So even if you're not necessarily getting lots of shots up, you are doing a lot to help the team. So don't feel the need to just shoot for the sake of shooting. Be aggressive when it fits within the flow of the offense, but at the same time, like trust that what you're doing is helping the team generate space, right? And then Max Christie, like I've been talking about this forever with Max. Like Max is a really interesting defensive player. He's talented, but a couple of things. Even though he gets good contests on jump shots, he doesn't bother the base or the pocket enough. So there's just going to be a lot of, I talk about this all the time, like real NBA scorers, they don't care if a hand's in their face. They professionally make shots with hands in their face. You have to find a way to disrupt their rhythm before the shot. And so Max has a lot of possessions where he's like this, getting a good contest on somebody, but the shot goes in because he's getting bumped off and his base is not strong enough to really like disrupt the offensive player's base. But that to me is just like a athletic limitation. That's not something I really get on him for. To me, it's the fact that every time he puts the ball on the floor, he gets like a little worked up on the type of shot that he's looking for. He drives with the intent of doing something for himself, whether that's like the big one yesterday, he kept trying to dunk on everybody. It's like, dude, you're not going to get a lot of like athletic dunks over Mason Plumlee and Kevin Durant. They're 7 feet tall. And Mason Plumlee, there was a play where Jackson Hayes was wide open for a drop off and he tried to like dunk on Mason Plumlee with like no runway, no advantage, no nothing. He got absolutely smothered. The Kevin Durant one, it's like, yeah, okay, you were there. You had a little bit of a step. You could have gone up and finished on KD, but it's like, that was a contested rim attempt versus one of the better rim protecting forwards in the league. Just move the damn ball and make the right play and try to make something happen. So the young players for the Lakers definitely had their first example of like not showing poise when they went on the road last night. But for the record, Lakers fans got to get used to that. When you've got really young, inexperienced players in your rotation, it will be consistent that they are inconsistent, right? Like that's the thing. Like there's not going to be, veterans are really good at finding what works and replicating it, finding what doesn't work and cutting that out, trimming the fat. Young players will like do something that works twice, and then instead of doing it again, they'll do something different. Or like they'll do something that doesn't work and they'll keep doing it. Like the young players always struggle to kind of differentiate between that process on a possession by possession basis. And so some of that you just got to get used to. But by far, the biggest factor in those Laker units struggling was that LeBron just played one of his worst games as a pro. He was just 3 for 14 from the field, just 11 points, absolutely no lift or burst at the rim. So I'm kind of looking at that as a silver lining for the Lakers. Like LeBron played the worst game he'll play all season, and the Lakers had a very good chance to win the game on the road against a good playoff team in the Phoenix Suns. So like, and the exciting part too is Anthony Davis just continues to look like an absolute monster. He's making a legit push in the early part of the season to try to enter into that top tier superstar tier with Giannis, Luka, and Nikola Jokic and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Now he needs to maintain that level over a much larger sample. No one's going to give you that credit over 4 games. These are guys that do it for 60, 70 games a year, right? But through 4 games, 33 points, 12 rebounds, 3 blocks per game on 64% true shooting. Just an absolute monster everywhere on defense. Made a couple insane defensive plays. Last night he blocked Kevin Durant twice, including smothering him at the rim once. Anthony Davis is insane. One last note on the Lakers. In the last 2 games, their personnel limitations have been on display. With the Kings consistently attacking D'Angelo Russell with DeMar DeRozan down the stretch of the game. Just in general, their lack of guard athleticism and how they really struggle against really fast guards that can get the ball moving, both in transition and in dribble drive situations. That was abundantly clear. And then in the Suns matchup, same sort of thing. Like, if KD was going against Gabe, they had at least a fighting shot. If KD was going against Austin, they had at least a fighting shot. If KD was going against Rui, it was at least a fighting shot. When D'Lo was out there and they got D'Lo on a switch, it just felt like a bucket or a foul every single time down the floor. And that's 2 games in a row where D'Lo is getting relentlessly picked on. And like some of this is like JJ's doing a lot more switching with D'Lo. But here's the thing. If you don't switch, you've got to do things like hedge and recover and double team. And those are areas where D'Lo's lack of effort and his inability to cover ground in rotation can be an issue. So like the thing is like, as much as I like D'Lo and as much as I think he does so much good for this team, and he really is an offensive weapon, and the Lakers have won a lot of games because of him. A big part of that early run in this game when the Lakers took an 18-point lead was D'Lo. I'm aware of all of that. But when push comes to shove and things really slow down in the half court and they're playing against good teams, D'Lo brings a unique, deadly damaging combo, which is 1, he's relentlessly attacked on defense, and 2, his offensive game doesn't really seem to consistently translate when it gets really physical, really intense against good teams. It's a lot of like in the free-flowing parts of the game where he has success, or against teams that aren't particularly big and athletic on the perimeter. Just time and time again, whether it's Bruce Brown kicking his ass in the Western Conference Finals, or it's him going for 0 points in a first round game against the Nuggets last year, just routinely in these really big, important physical games, he just struggles to do enough offensively to make up for the fact that he is by far one of the most limited defensive players in the league. And so like to me, even though I think the Lakers are a serious team, and even if they don't make a change, I think they win 50 games this year as long as they stay relatively healthy. The Lakers are good. This is something I've been consistent about ever since the late January this year. They are not going anywhere. They're not winning 4 playoff rounds until they get an upgrade at that 2 spot with D'Angelo Russell. And we'll see how that shapes out over the course of the season. But those limitations have been on display over the course of the last couple games. Really quickly, because I only have 5 minutes, I want to talk Pacers Magic. Paolo goes for 50 in this game. Really had his jump shot going. He had 7 pull-up jump shots in this game. But what really impressed me was the way he played down the stretch of the game. I talk a lot about the idea of basketball players understanding what their superpower is, okay? And what I mean by that is, like, for bigger players, like, it's cool to work on advanced skills training. It's cool to work on tough shot making. And there's important importance to those sorts of things, right? Like tough shot making is a coverage beater. If you're going against a drop coverage and sagging way back in a deep drop and your big set's a good screen, you're coming off to the elbow, like you gotta take that shot. That's what the defense is giving you, right? Like there are times where it's a coverage beater. It helps you rescue possessions when there's a few seconds on the shot clock or a few seconds on the game clock. And then big time in the playoffs when you run into bigger, more physical defenses and the rim is kind of shut off, the ability to hit over the top shots is an advantage. But for guys like Paolo, the biggest advantage he has by far is the simple fact that he's one of the biggest, strongest, most athletic players in the NBA. That is his superpower. That is what needs to be his primary focus. That is what needs to be his bread and butter. And I thought it was a huge sign of maturity last night from Paolo that in a game where his jump shot was on fire, he leaned almost entirely on his physical gifts to dominate the game late. On offense, he had 3 consecutive bully ball possessions where he went right through Aaron Nesmith. Then he goes on a short roll possession, goes right through Ben Shepherd at the basket, gets an and one. Then he goes right through Aaron Nesmith again. He was just powering through those guys, not settling. Again, if you got a different defender on you, maybe you need to, but he's so much bigger than Aaron Nesmith. And obviously on the short roll with Ben Shepherd, he just did what the defense didn't want him to do, which is to use his size and strength to power through the mismatch that he had. From there, that's when the Pacers started double teaming him. And instead of trying to force the issue or taking bad jump shots over double teams, he got rid of the basketball and played rotation advantage creation basketball. That's when they started getting wide open threes. And then Anthony Black, the game winner, same sort of thing. They were spamming this like kind of like a horn set ghost screen thing for with KCP, where KCP would basically just set a quick ghost screen for Paolo at the top of the key at the end of the game. And as he kept drawing 2 on the ball, and they just played advantage basketball out of it. And then Anthony Black ends up hitting the game winner out of the left corner that puts him up 3 with, I think it was less than a minute left. But then even on defense, like Pascal Siakam had been doing major damage to Orlando guards in the post in this game. He even hit a pretty tough fadeaway over Paolo down the stretch. But Paolo got 2 key stops against Pascal Siakam down the stretch. There's a fadeaway that he like smothered and forced a bad miss, and then a dribble drive where he flattened the drive out, pushed him behind the backboard, and actually forced him into a turnover. So like, again, hit a bunch of pull-up jump shots, scored a bunch of points. All that's cool, fine, and fancy. But down the stretch of the game, he played like a savvy vet and dominated the game with his physical gifts, punishing size mismatches to get easy shots around the basket, taking advantage of the defense loading up on him to give his teammates opportunities to capitalize, and weaponizing his athletic gifts on the defensive end of the floor to make the opposing stars uncomfortable. Just a dominant performance from Paolo Banchero. I also wanted to shout out Anthony Black. Jamal Mosley ended up having to rely a bunch on him in this game, especially late, because Franz Wagner ended up leaving the game with an illness. He was brilliant defensively. He got a big deflection and a steal on Andrew Nembhard on like kind of a little high post entry at the top of the key towards the end of the game. Then he made 2 huge offensive plays. He ran a cleared side ball screen in crunch time where he engaged the screen defender and made a simple pocket pass to Wendell Carter Jr., who drew a foul. Like, that's him generating offense in the half court, generating points for his team. And then on that final play, when Paolo draws 2 on the ball, swing, big corner 3, got to knock that down. And he had just missed one in the right corner a few possessions earlier, knocks it down. Orlando gets the win. Really, really impressive stuff from the second-year player, Anthony Black. One note on the Pacers. I talked a lot about yesterday how a bad Tyrese Haliburton here looks early. If you're looking for a silver lining, I thought down the stretch of this game that Tyrese was pretty good. Again, Orlando is one of the very best defenses in the league, and down the stretch of this game, he generated wide open 3 after wide open 3, ended up making one of his own that tied the game, but there were a couple of others that he generated that were just missed. And I just look at that as like a tiny little sign of optimism against a defense of that quality, given how poorly he's played to start this year, that he was able to generate some quality shots down the stretch. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting the show. For the record, Cavs fans, I'm very aware that you're 4-0 and you got a big win against the Knicks. I am planning a deep dive on the Cleveland Cavaliers for tomorrow. I'm just still working on it, and I'm not finished with it yet. And I was on some time constraints today, but we will do a deep dive on the Cavaliers tomorrow. I will see you guys then.